Here's a question for you. How many times have we seen a driver enter Formula 1 to a mountain of hype and expectation, only to have that driver fall by the wayside? And I can guarantee you, you're starting to think of a couple right now. Mick Schumacher is a prime example. At least he's a recent example. Now being courted by an IndyCar team, Mick Schumacher's career had that ever-looming shadow, because of the fact his father is Michael Schumacher, a 7-time champion, 91-time Grand Prix winner, and ironically, a man who said, and I quote, "Those who can't make it in Formula 1 move to IndyCar." Now his own son is looking at doing just that. Daniel Ricciardo also exists, and he looks done with racing in all forms now, although he is now a spokesman for Ford, so he is still around and doing something with cars at least. Maybe he will turn up somewhere else, but for now, he won't. And so many people still rate both of the drivers I've just mentioned, but their careers don't necessarily take the path that many would have hoped, for a variety of reasons. And I would also include Martin Brundle, whose career we will get to eventually in this sample group. He was highly rated, was as fast as Senna in the juniors, but he smashed his ankles in early in his career and then spent his career driving for the likes of Tyrrell, Zakspeed, Brabham and Ligier. You're not winning anything in those cars. But in the 80s there was a driver coming through who was touted as being one of the next big things in Formula 1, but for whatever reason he never reached the lofty heights that his talent would have suggested. That driver is Stefano Modena. One source that I've got open for this video says that Modena was an enigma. So much so, I'm probably going to struggle for images of him. So if you see a car in this video, it's a car he drove, but it might not necessarily be him that's driving it. But I've got a bunch of classic F1 mods for R Factor, so I might be able to find something for him. He doesn't have an entry on the now defunct F1 Rejects site, so he must have done something right in his career. The only entries for M being Tarso Marquez, Jean Max, Gaston Mazzacane, Perry McCarthy and Andrea Montermini. Or Montemini. I think we've established by now in these videos that Italian isn't my thing. And he was actually from Modena as well, the home of Enzo Ferrari and also in the same part of Italy as the Imola circuit, so he was surrounded by motorsport heritage. He won the Junior Direct Drive Karting World Cup in 1978 and followed that with 2 European Championships in 1983 and 1984. A move to International Formula 3000 beckoned for 1987, where he was at the Onyx team, a team that would later enter Formula 1 and be backed by the infamous Jean-Pierre Van Rossum and his Moneytron pyramid scheme. And he did quite well in his debut season, winning the championship with a 7-point cushion to Luis Perez Sala in second place. He also battered future F1 drivers in Mauricio Gugelmin, Yannick Dalmas, Gabriele Tarquini, Pierluigi Martini and Marc Blundell. Oh, and some bloke called Moreno, apparently. If you're wondering why there's a dotted line under his points tally, it's because he dropped his 6th place at Jarama, which means he scored 41 overall, but that worst result was dropped, so he scored 40 officially. The weird symbol next to the round at Spa is because Alfonso de Vinuesa and Perez Sala were involved in a massive smash, so half points were awarded. I think that's everything covered. Oh, and Jacques Villeneuve also raced in F3000 that year, although it's not the Jacques Villeneuve you're thinking of. This is the other Jacques Villeneuve, the uncle of the 1997 world champion. But things were about to step up for the young Italian. At the 1987 Japanese Grand Prix, Nigel Mansell crashed heavily and got injured, meaning he was unable to finish the season. To cover Williams as they fought for the Constructors' Championship, Williams poached Riccardo Patrese from Brabham. And Patrese was actually due to move to Williams anyway because Piquet was going to move to Lotus, so it was a case of Patrese being called up and being asked, "Would you mind coming into work a few months earlier than planned?" In response, Bernie Ecclestone, who owned Brabham at the time, decided to take a punt on Modena. Brabham put Stefano in the car for the Australian Grand Prix. Despite having virtually no F1 experience, Modena qualified his car in 15th, about 1.5 seconds behind the other Brabham driver, Andrea De Cesaris, another man in high demand for a career retrospective video. And Patrese, for that matter. But the race itself was one of attrition. The brakes were not having fun out there, with 4 cars having brake-related retirements. And looking at the list of retirements from that race, you've got all the usual retirement reasons. Accident, spun off, transmission, hydraulics, brakes, engine, oil leak. And then you have Modena, who retired because of physical. He just wasn't quite fit enough yet. And Senna had originally finished second in that race but was disqualified for having illegal brake ducts. Yannick Dalmas finished 5th as a result, but he was given no points. because LaRousse had only entered one car for the season, so he wasn't eligible. Despite the retirement though, Modena was now in high demand and did some testing for Brabham in the off-season. Bernie Eccleston originally wanted him in the car for 1988, but he decided that he wasn't going to enter the team for the 1988 season, so we came back in 1989. I can say we, right? I mean, driving for the esports team does count, doesn't it? It doesn't count, does it? So Modena was now going to be driving for EuroBrun, a team I've covered before. Driving an uncompetitive car with an uncompetitive engine, he did manage to get a couple of decent results. His best result of the season was 11th at the Hungaroring, but there are still 4 non-qualifications to his name in this particular season. But there was something else that seemed to go against him. For 3 straight races, Modena was excluded from the official results. At Imola, his car failed scrutineering. At Monaco, he missed the weight check and was deleted from the results. And at Mexico, he had an illegal rear wing. And funnily enough, at that same San Marino Grand Prix, the Osella of Nicola Larini was also removed from the entry list, because the car didn't comply with rules regarding the driver's feet being behind the centre line of the front axle. A rule that had been brought in following Jacques Laffitte's career-ending smash at Brands Hatch in 1986, although the rule itself was not brought in until 1988. No points are not even classified in the final standings, to the surprise of, well, nobody. That EuroBrun was an absolute bucket of bolts. It didn't even have a livery. In 1989, Brabham was back under new ownership, and Modena had a chance in a car that was at the very least a tiny bit more competitive than the bucket of bolts he'd just been driving. 2 non-finishes to open the 1989 season wasn't the start he wanted, but he then managed to take 3rd place at the Monaco Grand Prix, and it was his only point score of the season. The Judd-powered Brabham, now under the ownership of Joachim Lutti, was unreliable, and a little tricky to drive. Modena's teammate Martin Brundle had only just scraped through pre-qualifying, let alone the actual qualifying session, but still managed to qualify 4th overall. He would have been on course for Modena's 3rd place, but an iffy battery meant they had to stop and he finished 6th. Either way, Modena scored Brabham's last ever F1 podium. A run of 5 non-finishes in a row hurt Modena's season, the first of those being a collision at Montreal, but then 4 successive Judd engine failures. And, as a fun fact, you know who was one of the founders of Judd engines? Jack Brabham. At the Italian Grand Prix, Modena was once again excluded for missing the weight check, but it seems that Modena was getting the bad luck with reliability. 15 of Brabham's 17 retirements that year were reliability related. Brundle had more points scoring finishes, but both drivers finished equal on points, with Modena's podium putting him higher in the standings come the end. Gugelmin, De Cesaris, Caffey and Brundle all finished with 4 points. For the 1990 season, he would remain at Brabham, and once again he would only score the 1 points finish. The season started with him in the same Brabham BT58 he'd used the previous year, before the new BT59 arrived for the San Marino Grand Prix. But the best result he could achieve for that season was 7th following that 5th place at Phoenix, and the Brabham team really started their fall into obscurity and then eventual bankruptcy less than 18 months later. I've covered all that in the Downfall miniseries that you can find somewhere. For 1991 though, a lifeline. Ken Tyrrell had taken notice and hired Modena for that particular season. At the same time, Tyrrell had signed a sponsorship deal with Braun, the men's grooming devices people, and that gave Tyrrell a bit more spending money. Tyrrell, at this time, was still a team capable of the odd piece of brilliance, and the 1990 car was half decent, partly due to the Pirelli tyres working well on street circuits, as Jean Alesi would demonstrate on a couple of occasions the year before. The team of Modena and Satoru Nakajima were 4th and 5th respectively at Phoenix, but a hat-trick of retirements for both cars was broken up by Modena grabbing his best ever F1 result, 2nd at Montreal. That race was won by Nelson Piquet, whose car also ran Pirelli tyres, and Modena had qualified inside the top 10, which was pretty good going. By this point, Modena was still regarded as a future prospect. He'd qualified on the front row at Monaco, and the overall Tyrrell package was half decent, so he could at least get things going in the right direction. His 2nd place at Canada proved that he had something, although a lot of visits to some archive forum posts are quick to point out that it was more the Pirellis than the car. They worked better at places like Phoenix, Monaco and Canada. But the Honda in the Tyrrell was pretty good, if a bit on the heavy side. He'd actually been running 3rd in the rain at Imola before the engine gave up, and had been harrying Senna at Monaco before the Honda decided to not work there as well. But the good performances were either ruined by reliability or that Pirelli was losing the development war with Goodyear. The 1991 Canadian Grand Prix being the last time a Pirelli-tired car won a race until Sebastian Vettel would win the 2011 Australian Grand Prix. Basically, after Monaco he would be qualifying quite well. The Pirelli tyres were super soft, super sticky and super grippy over 1 or 2 laps or so because they heated up quicker, a bit like the special qualifying tyres that they would have had in the mid to late 80s. Although they did still have qualifying tyres at this particular point, but either way the Pirellis were better at qualifying. In the races though, he'd go backwards, although he would score 1 more point at the Japanese Grand Prix. After just 1 season with Tyrrell, he was moving elsewhere, to Jordan. And while Jordan had received a significant injection of cash from the South African oil company Sasol, the engine was underpowered and unreliable, the Yamaha deciding that it was better to overheat and blow up than it was to chuck out the power the car needed. And also, Modena was not a good fit for Jordan, because his attitude was considered, how would you describe it? Not the Jordan way, for want of a better term. He seemed a bit more moody and had a lack of what has been described as mechanical sympathy compared to Mauricio Gugelmin, who was in the other car. Gary Anderson, the car's designer, backed these claims up, saying that what would happen is that whenever the car broke down, Modena's motivation would drop. And instead of getting over the disappointment and moving forward, he kept lugging this disappointment around like it was in a rucksack, and it would just keep on accumulating. With the reliability woes of that Jordan, he was out at the end of the year, after scoring the team's only point of 1992 at the Australian Grand Prix. On top of this, he appeared to have some superstitions and habits that bordered on obsessive, much like fellow Italian Alberto Ascari, who was also a very superstitious fellow. Modena would make these bizarre requests like, can we swap sides of the garage, I don't like my car on the left hand side, and when he was in the car, nobody was allowed to touch the car except the 1 team member that would help him out with his seatbelts. And as a measure of how seriously this was taken, if somebody touched the car while he was strapped in, he would undo his belts, get out, and then get back in again. And he would race with his gloves inside out, although apparently that's not a superstition thing. You'd get chewed out for that today. A gentleman called Simon Lewis, who appears to have written several classic car-related books, said that he met Modena at a test in 1990 and asked for his autograph. Several Brabham team members had tried to talk to Modena, but he ignored them and had this 1,000-yard stare. Without even acknowledging Simon, Stefano took the book, signed it, and continued this stare, all while squatting in the corner of the garage. So what happened to this supposed star of the future? Well, after doing a lot of reading for this particular video, I think it all boils down to what's going on up here. Going back to his first race at Adelaide in 1987, you might recall he's listed as retiring due to physical. At least, that's what the Wikipedia results sheet says. He pulled out because he couldn't handle the physical nature of Formula 1 cars, essentially. Okay, it was his first time in a Formula 1 car. He'd just come in from F3000 without an off-season to get ready, so you can give him some leeway with that. But Keke Rosberg said it wasn't an excuse. He said that any driver who just gives up and parks it in their first Grand Prix can't want it enough. An Autosport forum user also points to something that Martin Brundle once said, I think in his autobiography. Brundle said that Modena was incredibly quick, but what he noticed while they were at Brabham is that Stefano didn't really have the mental toughness to succeed. When the car was working for him, he'd get something from it. He'd made Oscar Larrauri look like an amateur in the EuroBrun in 1988. But if the car wasn't working, he'd just lose interest completely. He wouldn't get as animated as a Jean Alesi or a Charles Leclerc. He'd just not be interested anymore. But at the same time, look at the cars that Modena drove in his Formula 1 career. EuroBrun, Brabham, Tyrrell and Jordan. They were slow and or unreliable. So you could say he just didn't get a shot in a top team that had a more reliable car. And that's a fair assessment. The only teammate who gave him any trouble was Brundle. Modena would have the edge in qualifying, but Brundle would use his endurance racing knowledge to do better in races. And also remember, Brundle was doing better than Modena at that Monaco Grand Prix, it's just that Stefano got a little bit lucky with the podium. But as someone has written here on the Autosport forums, none of the guys who came through F3000 in that era never got to top teams, or they did get to a top team and then got, I don't know if exposed is the right word, but exposed. Moreno was regarded as being pretty quick until he got to Benetton in 1991, and Dalmas, Perez Sala, Julian Bailey and Gabriele Tarquini never really got going either. And much like with Mick Schumacher in recent years, Modena was out of Formula 1 at the end of 1992, and nobody really wanted to pick him up after that. Much like his fellow countrymen in Tarquini and Larini, touring cars was the next destination. He raced in the Italian and German touring car series from 1993 all the way up to 1999 with Alfa Romeo. He was half decent, but at no point did he challenge for a title. He retired at the end of 2000 after a single year with Opel. His best result in Germany was 7th in the short-lived International Touring Car Series. He never bothered the top 10 in DTM, although he was 6th in his second Italian Super Turismo campaign. It's one thing to be good at what you do, but that's not the only thing you have to do to be at the top of your chosen sport. Michael Owen was considered to be one of the best young footballers of his generation, but that's not enough when your knees are made out of wet toilet paper. Darren Anderton had the nickname Sick Note for that same reason. And I'll just paraphrase this line that I've read here. Talent is one thing, but mentality, opportunity, money, determination, will, ambition, and the ability to enthuse and motivate those around you is something else. There's probably some kids out there that on their day blew Lewis Hamilton away in go-karts. Jamie Caroline destroyed Oscar Piastri in British Formula 4, but which one of those two is potentially going to win a world championship this year? There's also the story of Tommy Byrne, ridiculously talented and fast, but nobody would hire him. Wesley Graves, sitting front and centre with Hamilton in that McLaren family photo of 1998. One kid didn't get a career in motorsport, while the other went on to be the most successful Formula 1 driver in history. But some drivers can have bad things happen and then have these absolutely insane turnarounds. Max Verstappen last season at Mexico when he copped those 2 penalties and then the sprint race penalty at Sao Paulo. He and Red Bull turned this everybody's against us mentality into an absolute demolition job in the rain on the Sunday. Schumacher could turn a moment of head loss into an absolute masterclass as well, as he did in Spain in 1996 after walling it first lap of the Monaco Grand Prix. Also in the wet. Hamilton's "my tyres have got no grip so here's a lap record" stuff. Thinking all is lost makes him dig deeper and find something. Mika Häkkinen and Nico Rosberg didn't retire because they weren't fast anymore. They retired because mentally, they were done. Häkkinen because he was now a father and was fearing for his safety, and Rosberg because he knew he couldn't hack another season like that. And actually, thinking about it, if you want some insight into the mental health of a professional racing driver, I highly recommend Damon Hill's autobiography, Watching the Wheels. The pressure of being a professional sports person can be absolutely unbearable if you don't know how to handle it. But as always with these kinds of things, I'd like to know what you think down in the comments. So then, a look at the career of Stefano Modena, a driver who was fast, but after reading up about him, it looks like he never had the mental fortitude to stick things out when things were going against him, especially with reliability and slow cars. If this has been an interesting look through the motorsport history books, then do give the video a like so I know a good job was done, and for more stuff from the channel, get subscribed and also get that bell on so you never miss out on anything else I do around here. Massive thanks as ever go out to the rad lads over at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help keep the lights on around here or help with the picture purchasing piggy bank, then there's a link to Patreon in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates and anything else you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks down there too if you want to top up my coffee cup, and memberships for Patreon without the Patreon. So until next time, I've been Aidan Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.